Ready to begin. I want to just thank everybody for coming. It's important that we do this, and I really appreciate everybody who is able to be here today. I just wanted to thank the City of Saco for co-hosting this with us, and thank Andrew Dickinson, who's set all this up for us. He's the communications manager, facilities at Saco, the City of Saco, and the mayor and city administrator. We have a lot to get to. I'm not going to waste a lot of time, and Peter Slavinsky from Maine Geological Survey is our first speaker. He's going to update us on what's going on out there. So go ahead, Peter, and thank you.
Testing? Okay, great. I know, yeah. Do not tap on microphone.
No.
No, it's I'm going to try to share some slides here and make sure that this works. That worked. All right, excellent. So thanks, David. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Pete Slavinsky. I'm a marine geologist with the Maine Geological Survey, and I've been giving kind of semi-annual updates on some of the shoreline change that's occurring along the Saco beaches. And what we're going to do today is look at, if you remember, there was about 60,000 cubic yards that were, 62,000 cubic yards that were dredged and placed back in March of 2019. We're going to look at the trends along the shoreline since 2019 through 2022. Nothing before that and nothing else. So, and in some of these photos, you'll see my little co-workers who are my dogs that join me on the beach. All right, so in 2022, I was able to get out and just map a section of the shoreline from basically where Island View and Eagle Avenue are all the way up to about Bayview. So we don't have any data beyond that going closer to Goosefair Brook. But what I'm showing here is beach shoreline changes from 2019 to 2022. And reds are areas where the beach is being lost, and green are areas where the beach is stable or gaining. And basically, this is a no-brainer if you think about it. All the sand that was put, basically south of North and Maine has disappeared over those years and moved up the beach. The good thing is that the remainder of the beach, except for a small little pocket right here, is green, which shows that over the last 3 years, there has been growth of the beach, which is a really, really good thing. So basically the sediment that was placed here has moved up the beach and has continued to do so through this year. Another factor we look at is average dry beach width. That is how protective is the beach for breaking up waves. The average dry beach in Maine is about 60 feet. So as you can see, a huge portion of the beach is actually above 60 feet currently. With the narrowest dry beach in that section between North and Maine up to about Eagle Avenue. That's basically where the big stretch of seawall is, where you can't walk, unless the tide is close to mid-tide going out to low. The large section of dry beach in this area is actually much lower now than this is showing, because we just haven't been able to get out there and survey it in 2022 yet. But it's good to see that you're having above average dry beach widths. Now, I think this is a really important one to look at. This is dry beach with change, extending from just south of Island View Avenue, all the way up to close to Bayview. This is giving you a really good indicator of what's happening. The dry beach has been eroding pretty significantly over the last year. Okay, we're looking at up to about 12 feet of beach change over the last year, up until almost near the park. As you get from just south of the park all the way up to near Bayview, that section of beach has grown or has a little pocket of erosion, minor erosion in this area right here near the salient where the seawall is. So this is basically telling us that this trend is now starting to zipper along. So we're starting to see a loss of that dry beach. In terms of dune change, that's basically what's happening with the vegetation line. The trend that we're currently seeing is pockets of erosion and accretion. But what really is happening is there was growth from 2019 to 2021, And over the last year, there's been a pretty significant amount of erosion. But in some areas, there was so much growth over the 2 years prior to that you still have a positive signal, okay? So I'm going to just take you through some photos showing what we're looking at here. So this is the dry beach looking south near Eagle Avenue, back towards the seawall. Again, I couldn't walk this area because the tide was too high. You can see it's pretty wide. The geotube is exposed a little bit, but still, this is pretty wide for this time of year. Looking north, same thing. You can see the dune erosion that has occurred right in this area, right near Island View Avenue. This is actually pretty bad, the erosion that's occurred. But you can see there's still a really nice, wide, protective flat berm here, which isn't typical for the summer, for the winter season. It's usually much steeper. Going a little bit north and looking south, you can see a section of dune that's been eroded, and then the flat berm. And looking north, near Lighthouse Lane, this is Lighthouse Lane, I think, right up here. This section of dune actually underwent restoration, I think, in 2021, and you can see a little bit of the grass that's still poking through. So this got eroded out, but I do suspect this is going to recover because this grass is still here. And you can see the nice sloped berm here that's still protective. This is where things start to turn a little bit worse. This is at the entrance to the state park looking north. This is the highest erosion rate right now in the city. You can see all these trees that are exposed. And again, this actually grew out through 2021, but in the last year has eroded, in my estimation, about 10 to 15 feet. So now that you have trees eroded out into the surf zone almost. This is just north of the park looking south. And you can see a little big section of the highest dune erosion that's occurring. Looking south again from a little bit farther north, you can see these trees were actually blown down in the last storm that occurred. And this is a little bit farther up, just south of the seawall, in front of the 5 properties on Seaside Avenue. And you can see how the dune's been scarped, but you're not getting that really, really massive erosion into the pitch pine forest. So the erosion is now slowing down here. This is a look along the wall in front of those 5 properties, and you can see you still have a bit of a berm, but you can see that the tides actually did wash up to here at one point. So there's much narrower dry beach in this area than along the other section of beach. And this is just north of the seawall, looking along Seaside Avenue, looking up towards Bayview, right up in here. And you can see, I think these stakes are an area where the dune was restored in 2021. And you can see it's been scarped out a little tiny bit. But there's still plants left, which is good. I think that come summertime, these will recover. So the take-home points really are the nourished beach area is gone. I'm on that one, sorry. The other one disconnected. But the rest of the beach still grew. But now it's beginning to erode in 2022. In terms of the dry beach, the dry beach itself is better than average. So I think that's a pretty good indicator. And it continues to positively influence basically the entire stretch of beach. The changes indicate that there's a northward transport of sand, which isn't, unexpected. So things are looking pretty good, though, in terms of your dry beach width. In terms of dune change, now, again, we had growth from 2019 to 2021. Pretty good erosion of the dune this past year. However, because of that positive growth over the first 2 years, in some areas, even though you had a lot of erosion this last year, there's still a slight positive trend, which is a good thing. If we didn't have the nourishment, that dune would have been chewed up and eroded even more. So basically the long-term, 3-year take-home point is the nourishment did a really good thing, and it's still doing a good thing. The problem that we're starting to see, though, is you're starting to see more of those reds appearing for that dry beach width change over the last year, and that dune, I think, is going to continue to get chewed away. Hopefully this summer will help stabilize things, and maybe there'll be some activities to restore sections of dune. I think there are also some things that the city can do with from private property owners in thinking about not actually restoring the frontal dune ridge, but restoring the ridge behind the frontal dune. But I do think the erosion trend that we're starting to see creeping northwards, that's probably going to continue. So my estimation is that the benefits of the beach nourishment, this will probably be the last year that we see it, and we'll probably start going back to an erosive trend. Thanks.
Are there any questions for Peter? Somebody did ask specifically about the area from Bay Avenue to Lower Beach Road, but I think you covered that off in a different use of streets, that's all.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what section from Lower Beach Road, where?
From Bay Avenue, which is over by where Hewitt's is.
Yeah, no, that area is where the nourishment went originally.
Yeah,
and
right.
If we were having this conversation a year or two ago, I would say you'd see a big green area there in terms of the growth of the beach, but that disappeared very, very quickly. I mean, over a period of about a year and a half. But that sediment has been moving northwards the whole time. So I was surprised when I walked the beach in March that there was still so much sand on the beach. I thought most of it would have already been up near Goose Fair Brook. But there's your average dry beach width is around 70 feet for most of the stretch of shoreline. As soon as you get away from the walls at end around, Island View Avenue or just south of that. So that stretch that you're talking about is, right now, it's almost back to what it was, quote, unquote, prior to nourishment. But that sand is still clearly working its way northwards, and it's still on the beach doing what it's supposed to. So I would call that nourishment project a success.
There's no way, though, to get any natural nourishment of that area. There's no sand ever, does any sand ever, no sand comes in?
No. There's no sand that naturally gets to that location at all right now. There is a long-term feature, we call it a bar that extends from north in Maine, almost to the jetty, and you can see it in aerial images, and that helps provide some stability, but it's not adding sand. What sand is there is just trapped in that section, or it's eroding away and moving northwards. The only way to really get a continual supply of sand there would be to put something in the river that's kind of like a catch basin that catches the sand, and then there's a permanent pump installed that pumps the sand over the jetty, literally like every couple days or every couple weeks as sand gets caught there. It's called a sand bypass system. Right now, that would be the only way to get sand there on a literally regular basis, besides dredging it every 5 or 10 years and putting the sand there. But I think a really important conversation to have for other sections of the shoreline is to talk about dune restoration efforts. And again, not focus necessarily on trying to hold the front line where the current dune is getting eroded, but in areas of properties where there is room to talk about restoring sections, restoring a frontal dune ridge farther back. So, literally what was done at by the Ferry Beach Park Association. They restored the back, a ridge behind the frontal dune, and that actually now is what's getting eroded. So it buys you a lot of time and allows for the system to naturally stabilize over a period of time before active waves start eroding it.
Are there programs to do dune restoration? How does that normally get done? Like the dune restoration that we've done here.
Typically, it's been privately funded.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe Brian at some point can speak about whether or not CCGs can be used for projects like that. But coastal community grants is what I mean by CCGs. But typically it's been privately funded or been done in concert with, and it hasn't been done in Saco as far as I know, but in concert with beach nourishment projects. So in areas of Scarborough and in areas of Wells, when they've done projects in the past, they've actually restored dune ridges as well. When they've dredged, say, the Scarborough River channel, when that's been dredged. A dune ridge was actually constructed along Western Beach for bird habitat. And I think when they have done the Wells Harbor, they've actually constructed a dune ridge along Drake's Island Beach. So it's been done before in concert with federal dredging projects.
Okay. Anybody else for a question?
Yes, I have one. Peter, if we could continually put sand on the beach, would it eventually stabilize and the erosion go to a sort of a neutral or much more neutral position than it is currently?
More neutral, yes, but I still think the concept of some kind of structure that slows down erosion is going to be beneficial to the process. I think the system is 150 years out of whack in terms of the sediment budget. So it's kind of dropping some coins in and having dollars come out of the bottom when you want to drop coins in and have the coins kind of stay. And that's not necessarily occurring right now. So the whole concept of slowing down the erosion rate by linking what's done in terms of adding sand to some kind of structure, whether it's, a spur that was proposed by the Corps, or whether it is a closer near shore living shoreline structure that was proposed by some of the living shoreline folks and you guys are looking at. Something like that is going to be needed to help keep the sand there for a longer time than what is there now. Because as we saw, when you put 60,000 cubic yards into a spot, it's gone pretty quick, but it is benefiting the rest of the beach. But if the goal is to keep sand in that corner, north and Maine south, basically, it's going to take more, I think, than just adding sand on a regular basis.
What about the, I know you've been working on some living shorelines projects. Would they have any application here?
I think what was being investigated in terms of the use of a nearshore reef, I'll call it, is something that probably would be beneficial to the site as opposed to some of the things that we've looked at in the past. So a lot of our living shoreline work has focused on the marsh and bluff environment. And the techniques there are a little bit different than an open beach environment which sees pretty large waves during storm events. We're talking about 3-foot waves or less is what we see in the environments that we've currently worked in. So you're going to need some kind of structures, I think, that help break up the wave energy. And the conceptual WADs or wave attenuation devices that I've looked at in a report that I've looked at from Living Shoreline Solutions looks like a solution that potentially could work. The whole concept of putting something in the water that helps trip up the waves isn't necessarily anything new, but it has not been done in really the marine, the dynamic beach/marine environment in Maine so far. These nearshore sills, as they're called, they have been instituted elsewhere in terms of trying to trip up some wave energy or protect areas of marsh south of us. But as far as I know, they haven't really been implemented anywhere in New England. And the potential size of these structures is something that, as you know from the report, is something that it would also be new. They haven't been built to this size before or put into such a dynamic environment before. They have been used along the Gulf Coast in areas to protect some beach areas where, in general, conditions are pretty calm, but then they have apparently survived hurricanes. So that's a good sign. I think this, we call that kind of living shoreline approach really gray infrastructure. It's not green infrastructure. You're not just planting things. But a nearshore sill is probably something that, could have a benefit to the beach there in terms of keeping sand there. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
From watching these presentations, it seems to me that the movement of sand is kind of a fundamental principle of these shoreline functions. And that in our case, sand kind of moves north. That's what it does in Saco Bay. And so I know there's some concern of some of the neighborhoods that if we do build a structure that kind of holds sand in that pocket, as you're talking about, there's still going to be sand moving northward from somewhere. And that somewhere just moves up the beach to wherever the edge of that structure is. And I think that's a feature of both the Army Corps structure and a living shorelines structure. But I'm wondering if you can talk about that and that movement of sand and how a structure might impact that and what it means to hold sand in some place.
Sure. What you're describing is what we call end effect erosion. And you could see it where the seawall currently terminates at the dune, where the bulkhead seawall was built to help protect sections of Surf Street. So the whole concept of putting some kind of structure in is to slow down the northern transport of sediment, not stop it. So the concern about end effect, I think, is still valid, but if a structure is designed properly, the idea is that it traps a certain amount of sand, but allows a certain amount of sand to continue to go northward. So you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, as they say, because if you stop all northern transport of sand in, say, a 1,000-foot pocket north of the jetty, then from the 1,000-foot pocket north of that, that's where the rest of the sand is going to be eroded from to go northwards into the northern ends of Saco Bay. So I think that concern is very valid, and at the Maine Geological Survey, the whole end effect problem is something that we're also very concerned about. Because, again, anytime you're sequestering sand in one area, there's going to be sand taken from another area. So that's why there's this balance between slowing down erosion but not stopping it. That's really, really important. So the idea of putting a structure in and then slowing down erosion, but then over time keeping sand going into that, say, pocket that is built, if the erosion is slowed down, if the erosion of that pocket is slowed down, yet it continues to get a regular supply of sediment, whether it's from that catch basin thing I talked about, or every couple of years a dredge occurs and that material is placed. So it keeps that flow of sand going north. If you do this once and not do it again, you're still going to have erosion problems. So
Thank you.
hope that addresses that. Any other questions?
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll make sure I turn my mic off.
We're going to quickly run through some updates of some of the projects that we have ongoing. Since we have both Bonnie and Alex here from Senator King and Collins, they can share the PPA Army Corps update with Brian. I'll let Brian start, and you can say what you wish, and we can let our federal representatives say more at this point as opposed to waiting till we get further in.
Great, thank you, David. So the big piece of news since our last meeting a year ago, obviously, is, and we've moved further in this process than we have ever before. So the city has issued, and our council did support unanimously, a letter of support to be the non-federal sponsor in seeking a PPA with the Army Corps. So that's a major, major step forward, and one that has not happened in all of our time discussing this issue with the Army Corps. So thank you to obviously our council and to everyone here who's worked on that, and it's a major step forward. I'll let Bonnie, Alex, our congressional delegation, chime in on some of the other things happening, but we are currently waiting for some revised cost estimates that we hope to have this spring. And then also there was some news with the recent passage of the Omnibus Appropriations bill. There was some language in there directing the secretary of that agency to begin drafting the PPA. So I'll let them talk more on that. But we've seen some major progress. I also want to thank, from the city, everyone at SOS, everyone involved here for their continued advocacy on this. We are actually seeing some progress. The wheels of government sometimes turn slowly. We know that. But progress, I think, is the key word to remember, and we are moving forward. So thank you, and thank you to our congressional delegation, all of you who have been just so critical in our success here in trying to move this forward. So thank you very much to all of you.
Yes, so in the, as you said, in the omnibus that just passed a few weeks ago, our office had worked with the Energy and Water Committee to get the following included based off of the great progress with the City of Saco and Army Corps had already had last year. So we said, the committee is pleased the Corps has accepted a letter of support from the City of Saco, making them the non-federal sponsor of the Camp Ellis project. The committee directs the Secretary to finalize a project partnership agreement between the City of Saco and the Corps and to continue the collaborative effort to address the continued erosion at Camp Ellis Beach. So that's obviously the first time that we've been able to put that specific language in there because we're right now at a very new point with this Project 111. We have continued to work with the committee to get whatever support Saco needs in moving forward on this. And we'll have some more updates later on this as well.
Thank you. Just to add on to Alex, so for everybody's awareness, Senator Collins' office, our office, Senator King, and Representative Shelley Pingree's office, all of us have been coordinating all of our efforts to keep this process moving forward. And you're correct, we're awaiting, and we've checked in with Army Corps to see the status. They expect the PPA language, their update on finances, all of that sometime this spring. They feel that that's coming up relatively quickly, given how long we've been waiting for it. And on top of that, we've looked at other ways in which we might support the efforts in Saco, because we know that the costs are definitely going to be higher than they were. And so they're going to exceed what the authorization was back in 2007. So there is work behind the scenes going on for, and whether that'll be successful or not, we don't know. The last time we tried to do this through the WRDA bill, it was considered an earmark before earmarks came out again, and so that was put aside. Whether we'll be successful this time around or whether there may be other ways in which we can support Saco going forward, I just want you to know that we are all working together on this, and certainly will hope to be able to see this continue to move forward productively.
Okay. I've been requested that prior to speaking that everybody identify themselves for a few members of the press that we have here today, and my bad too for not having an introduction prior, but that'll be the process going forward. Any questions for Brian, Alex? Alex represents Senator Collins, Bonnie represents Senator King. Can we get Senator King to maybe storm the commander's office? I mean, sure. Okay.
So yeah, again, Alex Pelzar, Senator Collins' office. So the other, as Bonnie had said, we're looking at many different options of how to make up that chunk of money that is going to be the funding gap for the Project 111 with the Army Corps. We've been working extensively with the energy and water folks and Army Corps to try to come up with a solution. At this point, we are working with the Energy and Water Committee on the WRDA 2020 bill to fix any, let me step back a minute. There was a provision years ago in a previous WRDA that allowed Army Corps to increase a budget based off of an increase in costs because of inflation. We are looking to make sure that the Project 111 is eligible for that and are working with the energy and water folks currently to fix any language that is needed to make that work. So that's most likely where the funding, additional funding that will be needed to, any additional costs above and beyond the 26.9 or the 23 million that might be left of that original 26.9, that's most likely where we will be able to get it. So we're working extensively on that, and I know that Representative Pingree's office is working on the House side to make sure that anything that we get included in the Senate version of the WRDA bill will also be included in the House version so we don't have any discrepancies. So working really hard on that, and we'll keep the city apprised as we get that all finalized.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Brian, anything further from you?
No, again, just thank you so much to everyone from our congressional delegation who support us on this. And again, progress. Wheels of government moving slowly, but progress is being made. So thank you.
Pam, would you like to say anything? Okay. Pam is the representative for Shelley Pingree. Okay, if that's concluded, we'll move onward to Kevin Roach. Kevin's going to give us updates on both what we've been done with living shorelines and our attempts to have the county purchase a dredge.
Hello, everyone, and thank you from, with David, I lead SOS Saco Bay, and I'd like to thank everyone for being here, and I think everyone in this room has helped with these efforts, and also just from being here, so thank you. I'd like to first address, so Save Our Shores Saco Bay, we're a nonprofit, advocacy group for Saco Bay issues. So it includes advocating for Army Corps progress, but it also includes living shorelines type solutions, which I'll talk about now, and also some sort of sand movement dredging to happen in the bay as well. I'm just going to hand out, I'm just going to go this way in the room. You can just look at this report. This is the Living Shoreline Solutions. If not everyone's up to speed on this, this is a company that had Peter had spoken to about WADs, wave attenuation devices that could be put as structure or barrier into the water to retain sand. I want to make it clear that this is not part of the city's negotiations with the Army Corps as we await a PPA. That's its own lane. This study and this report, first I want to thank Representative Copeland for getting a resolution passed for the state to be in the background, be in supportive of resolution to our issues down here. And then our senator, State Senator Bailey, for getting funding for this study, which let me just hand it this way. You can just flip through. But this is the tangible result of that. So in that report, I'll just go over some real high-level highlights, and we can have questions from that. But they were up here in the fall, late fall, November, with Peter, with Pete Hanrahan, ourselves, as they were on site for a couple of days up and down Saco Bay, analyzing the effects of what's been happening up here visually, while they brought data back to them to do some simulation studies in their environment. And so what they've top line recommendation is that the Army Corps proposal is a 750-foot hard barrier coming from the existing jetty to out about at the point, at the curve, a little bit past that. And what Living Shoreline Solutions has proposed is a double row, and their rows are double WAD device rows, so it's actually 4 rows of wave attenuation devices that go up to 3,000 feet and 15 feet high. And so that goes to the point that Peter brought up about the size. They are going to be the biggest sizes they have developed, and also the length and the visual to our shoreline. But they had shown and addressed the concerns that number one, certainly the waves are deflected where they're not going to take out areas to the north, and then it would not adversely affect sand movement to go to north. If you remember, just a reminder that if we did nothing, if we did not even do that dredge sand dump in 2019, doing nothing is not an option. we would be in worse trouble with especially the news of the state park being hit. So doing nothing, there is no sand heading north from Camp Ellis. So we're very pleased. The report has been submitted in. It's basically a state-owned report that the state has the report. We would like to get this more publicized out there once I think we have the state acknowledgement that they have the report now. And from there, we would like to, we'd like to have it be there as an option, regardless of, or regardless of how the Army Corps plays out here. But we have the tool in the tool shed now. We have a study, and it's directly studying the Camp Ellis area, and we look forward to moving forward with these type of solutions. Is there any questions on that? Yeah.
Is that water report online anywhere?
It is not online yet. It would not be with the city because it's cities in their own lane with the Army Corps, and we're just talking to people actually today, and we just got word from Living Shoreline Solutions that they have not gotten a full acknowledgement from the state that it's good, but we believe it is at this point. So it should be. We'd like to get it onto. It'll be on our website, Save Our Shore Saco Bay, and on our Facebook site in the coming weeks, next couple of weeks. But you are the first. This group is the first to see the hard copy being passed around here.
So for folks in the crowd, one of the big things I just wanted to clarify is the Army Corps of Engineers proposal is to build a 750-foot riprap spur. So it literally is what you have along the stretch of the shoreline there. It would be kind of like a pyramid-shaped, somewhat pyramid, trapezoidal-shaped spur of rock. The difference between that and these wave attenuation devices is the wave attenuation devices, even though they're individual trapezoidal shaped, they're about 15 feet wide, 15 feet tall. They have holes in them, big holes, that allow for currents and sand potentially to move through them. So that's the big difference between just building a structure with rock, which is meant to break up wave energy, which comes between Ram and Eagle Island, bounces off the jetty. That's what the core proposal is to address. Versus putting these structures in much closer to the shoreline, much closer to the shoreline, and having them extend much farther. The purpose is very, very different. They break up wave energy, but they don't block it, per se. They kind of let it through. They break it down, and through the holes, they let it through. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on the difference between those two things.
Can I ask you a question, Peter, about that?
Yes.
Would you be looking at some sort of interaction between those two different structures? Would there be any negative interaction between if they built a spur jetty and these wave attenuation devices?
At the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, we hadn't even considered that. I would think that would have to be looked at. If that was what was going to happen, that'd have to be looked at.
Yeah.
Neither model, which was done, so the Army Corps of Engineers developed their solution after looking at 31 different models, 31 different scenarios in a model. And independently, LSS, Living Shoreline Solutions, did a wave model to look at, a very generalized wave model, to look at how the WADs might interact with waves. Nobody's looked at both of them together. So I would think that you'd have to look at them kind of together if you
Yeah.
wanted to get a sense of what would happen.
Yeah. Just food for thought.
Yeah, so nobody's even brought that question up. So good question, Mary Beth.
Okay.
I would like to point out that if both were built, one would actually be built inside the other, because the rock jetty that the Corps is talking about is at 2,000 feet, and the WAD placement is, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's
1,500.
It's like 1,500 feet. So there's like 500 feet of difference between the two.
Okay. Kevin, can you give us a dredge update and
Oh, yeah, sure.
a brief one, please?
Yeah, yes. Also, we would like to be ready for, dredging, sand movement. A lot of our sand is up at the Scarborough Harbor. So for everyone in the room, SOS Saco Bay over the summer went to speak to the county government, York County government, who has $41 million of funding from federal American Rescue Plan funds. Their annual budget is $25 million, so that's a lot of money for the county. So we decided to put an application in for a $1.8 million dredge, which includes a support boat and some accessories and the transport up here and plenty of training time for whichever community comes up would want to use it. We have modeled it after a Barnstable County dredge program in Cape Cod that has been pretty successful. We're not anticipating that the county jumps in and runs the dredge. So we went before them for their vote in October, and we were very happy with the commissioners giving us a chance to get more information to them, especially other community interests. So they tabled the vote to this April, the first or second week of April, to vote for the dredge, and then from there talk about how we would organize possibly a state-backed commission similar to either the Saco River Corridor or the transit model that we have here for the tri-communities, and move from there. So we do appreciate as much support we can get in this room from the Saco Bay communities, and we have a letter of interest support vote tonight with the Saco City Council. We have a vote tomorrow with the Kennebunk Town Council, and we have a vote with the Kennebunk Port Town Council on Thursday night. We have already got letters of support from Scarborough, which is outside the county, but they would participate in it, utilize it. Old Orchard, Wells, and Biddeford. So we await two more communities and possibly Kittery coming down towards the end of the month here. That's where we're at.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin he's put a tremendous amount of work into this. It'll, hopefully it will all come to fruition, but also wanted to thank Mayor Doyle, who's also been incredibly supportive of this. We also have support from Matt Burns, the State DOT Dredge Director. Dan Chadbourne, our Harbor Master, has helped us, Pat Fox, a whole bunch of people, and Donna, too, for getting us going on the right path. And it's been a lot of work, and it's been difficult at times, but we're trying to remain optimistic that it's something that could happen. I think it will be a huge win and something that we could really utilize.
Hey, David, could I ask a follow-up question for Kevin?
You may.
The dredge that's being looked at, is that a clamshell dredge not with booster pump capacity, or is it something that could pump sand onto the beach, or is it just something that can put it in the near shore?
Yeah, it's a hydraulic dredge that you would still have to get by as part of your accessories, the hose length that you want to do, but it can go up to like 2 miles to pump. Yep. I also want to thank, if it wasn't for Mayor Doyle's speech in front of the commissioners in October, I don't think we would be here. I'd like to thank Commissioner Sicard for his continued lobbying efforts of his other fellow commissioners, but we just need to get to that purchase order finish line, if you call it that, and then we will have a key tool in our tool shed. Also, other private organizations have supported like University of New England, their support as well. So.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Kevin. So I want to move on. We're running a little slow, but it's okay. So we wanted to look today at maybe some of the ways that government can help us get some of these projects moving. Obviously, we heard from Alex and Bonnie, but Lori Gramlich is the state rep from District 13, Old Orchard Beach, and she's been a huge supporter of everything we try to do, and we're a supporter of yours as well. So she's going to give a brief presentation, and then we'll hear from a couple of officials and hopefully have some time for some questions and discussion after. So thank you. It's yours, Lori.
Thank you, David. Should I tap it? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. And I do have a presentation I'm happy to have David distribute to everybody because I'm conscientious of the time here, so I'm probably going to go through it a little bit quickly, but you'll get the high-level points. So I am Lori Gramlich, and I represent House District 13, which is the lovely seaside community of Old Orchard Beach. And that's how I introduce myself every time in my committee. I'm in my second term, and I'm very proud to serve on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. We've done a lot of pretty incredible pieces of work, and so I'm going to kind of take us up and kind of we're in the weeds a little bit talking about the specificity around what's happening with the Bay, but I want to take a 30,000-foot view up and take a bigger picture look at what's happening with climate in general, which definitely has an impact on everything that we're talking about. So climate change, we know that it's real, we know that it's happening, and we also know that our natural resources are our greatest assets, and it's a huge driver of our economy. I tell folks all the time in Old Orchard Beach, if we don't have a beach, we don't have an economy. It's just that simple. So you heard Peter and others talk about what would happen, and Kevin and others, the cost of doing nothing. If we don't adapt to climate change, we are going to have significant economic losses in the state of Maine. We saw the analysis from Peter, we saw what's happening, and it kind of does ebb and flow, but overall we're seeing huge implications of what is happening with our shoreline, and we need to do everything, every tool in our toolbox to address it. So I just want to talk a little bit about some bigger picture economic drivers and economic losses. So we know that sea level is rising, and that is impacted by storm surges. So by about 2050, and don't look now, folks, it's not that far away, it could lead to a loss of about 22,000 jobs and building damage of $17.5 billion cumulatively between 2020 and 2050. Sea level rise is a contributor of net loss of eelgrass, and we talked about how we want to not just do sand restoration, but also how do we do dune restoration, which is really critically important. If we don't do any of this, like Kevin said, doing nothing is going to put us in, at least we're moving the needle. Doing nothing is not going to, it's not going to reverse a thing. And so the social costs are enormous. $4 million in social costs, and this has to do with things like vector-borne disease, for example. We're seeing shorter winters. We're seeing really an uptick, no pun, in the tick population. We're seeing people getting sicker from Lyme disease. This has a cost of about $10 million annually for patient treatment alone. And that has a direct correlation to climate change. Again, sea level rise in Maine could cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.67 billion in tourism by 2100. Sounds weird to say that. With 13 million fewer visitors coming to the beaches. I said earlier, if we don't have a beach in Old Orchard, we don't have an economy. Everybody here knows that we are very dependent on our summer tourism. We are very dependent on every single business that's along that shoreline. And if we don't have a beach for folks to come to, they're not going to come, and that will have profound implications on our economy. Again, we talked about vector-borne disease. We talked about healthcare costs. People are getting sicker, and it is related to climate change. Healthcare costs are costing nearly by 2100, $10 million annually, and that's significant. And again, nearly $600 million of annual revenue in lobster and aquaculture is at risk. We've heard about the Gulf of Maine warming. One of the things that I learned on the environmental committee during my first term is that, and Peter can correct me if I'm mistaken, that the Gulf of Maine is warming about 99% quicker than any other body of water in the world. And that's going to have significant implications. Lobsters like cold water. They're going to be migrating north, and that's going to have huge implications on our economy in terms of the lobster industry. So, what can we do? We've talked a lot about some local solutions. I like to say, you know, think globally, act locally. We're doing a lot. I think we've got a lot of things happening, boots on the ground. But I want to just highlight some of what we've done in the legislature. Kevin mentioned Representative Copeland and Senator Bailey, both of whom are here, who have been great champions working on this issue. All of us that live in the Saco Bay community understands very, very clearly that we need to collectively come together to address this. And so we've done some pretty incredible work, in my opinion, at least in the legislature and certainly on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. So we are thrilled to have been able to work with the Mills administration in terms of the climate action goals that she and members of your team, Brian, have worked really hard, working with Hannah Pingree and others to make this a realization. So while Maine has been among the one of the leaders in the United States when it comes to mitigating greenhouse gases, significant progress still needs to occur between 2030 and 2050 if we want to meet those targets. Again, we talked about what would happen with inaction, and it's pretty profound. We really need to take action to ensure that you know, our citizens, the environment, our economy, and society are more resilient to the impacts of climate change, and they're occurring all the time. I'm really pleased to also share that one of my colleagues, who also lives on the shore down in York County, she serves with me on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and she also serves on the Marine Resources Committee. Representative Lydia Bloom was, I believe, the only representative from the state of Maine to attend the Climate Council in Glasgow. So she was a great representative and a great champion for a lot of the work that we're trying to do to mitigate climate change. So you talked about the economy and economic opportunity and prosperity. As we chart the course for our economic recovery, many of our solutions in the Climate Action Plan can really leverage Maine's strengths and reverse workforce trends by supporting good-paying jobs. People are concerned when we make these transitions that it's going to have an adverse implication on jobs in the economy. I would argue that you know, we don't work in a silo, and we can kind of walk and chew gum at the same time, so we can transition from our dependency that has adverse impact on our climate to doing more economic-friendly initiatives that will create more jobs at the same time. So we want to advance equity through Maine's climate response. Like other dislocations and disruptions to society, from recessions to pandemics, which we all know we've been living in, the cost of Maine's inaction on climate change will be acutely borne by vulnerable communities. So, you know, I kind of look at it also as an opportunity for environmental justice. So in the legislature, we took some pretty significant steps to address climate by 2021 in the legislature, ramping up land conservation efforts, supporting climate resilience and emission reduction projects, providing weatherization funding, encourage the use of electric vehicles, divesting from fossil fuel companies, improving energy utilities, and reforming our recycling system. And people wonder, well, hold on a second, how does that have anything to do with what we're talking about in terms of Saco Bay? As I said earlier, climate, from the 30,000-foot view, is a bigger picture initiative, and every single thing that we're doing to mitigate that is going to have a direct impact on what's happening with our shoreline. So in 2021, we passed a series of bills. We had three bills that were embedded into the governor's biennial budget. And I'm going to get this presentation out to folks, so I'm not going to take the time to read all of these. In addition, we were able to leverage, certainly through the ARPA funding, a number of initiatives that would help with greenhouse gas emissions and land conservation. We did a lot of work around landfilling and solid waste. I got to tell you, if somebody would have told me 4 years ago I'd be steeped up in solid waste and what that all means, I would never have believed them, but that's one of the things that we do on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. And again, encouraging the use of electronic vehicles. Some legislation specific to sea level, bringing it right back down again. There presently is a bill on the special appropriations table. It's LD 49. It was introduced by Representative Brennan, Michael Brennan from Portland, and it would authorize a general bond initiative to invest in infrastructure to address sea level rise. Everything that you all talked about before me, talking about the cost of you know, it's not an inexpensive prospect, but it's an investment in our future. And so Representative Brennan has a $50 million bond before the Appropriations Committee to improve waterfront and coastal infrastructure at municipalities to help address sea level rise. Additionally, there's another piece of legislation that is specific to sea level. It's a resolve to analyze the impact of sea level rise. A task group got together to explore these initiatives and report back to our committee so that we can submit legislation based on those findings. LD 1970, an act to implement agency recommendations to address sea level rise, partners with the Department of Environmental Protection to consider sea level rise in determining whether a developer has made adequate provisions to protect the environment. And then finally, this bill is working its way through the legislature as we speak. It's another resolve, LD 1972. It's a resolve to establish a pilot program to encourage climate education in Maine public schools. So it establishes a 3-year pilot program for professional development for educators to teach climate science in schools. And we know that, at least in my committee, I see all the time young people coming before us, and you know, some of them are in middle school and high school, they can't even vote yet. They're looking to us. We're the grown-ups in the room, and it's our responsibility to address this head-on for the future of our kids and their kids. So I've got some resources here. The other piece that's not in the slide presentation, I'm going to toot my own horn for just a minute, is a piece of legislation that I introduced during my very first term. It was an act to protect Maine beaches and shoreline, LD 775. We were able to partner with the Department of Environmental Protection to help through their rulemaking to streamline the permitting process so that we can bring that sand in, like Peter and like Kevin had talked about, not only for communities but for homeowners. Right now, we're working it through, but presently it's a pretty cumbersome permitting process, and this would enable municipalities and homeowners to be able to take advantage of the permitting, at least to bring that sand replenishment in, and hopefully ease. And I know Mary Beth is here; she can kind of elaborate on that a little bit. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
I would just like to add a point to what you presented. The state of Maine is divided up into multiple economic summary areas. Biddeford is one of those summary areas, and it includes Old Orchard, Biddeford, Saco, Dayton, and surrounding communities. During the summer, each year, this area brings $250 million into this area as far as funding, just in the summer. And if you take a look at the other economic summary areas in York County, it's another $250 million. So there's $500 million every year that we see just from tourists coming to our area. It just sort of underscores how important our beaches are and how we really need to take care of them. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and that, quite frankly, is one of the reasons that I requested to be on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, because I think quite often we don't necessarily look at what the economic implications are. And you'll hear folks say, well, if you're an environmentalist, you don't really care about the economy. And there's sometimes there seems to be a disconnect. I would argue conversely that they really go hand in hand. And it's a kind of message that can resonate with folks all over, across the board, from this area all the way down to York. So I agree. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Mike Berman from Saco City Council, Ward 4. I really appreciate everything you said about climate change. I think it's also really important to acknowledge that the erosion we're seeing at Camp Ellis and in Saco Bay, though, is not the direct result of climate change, but is the result of a man-made structure in the Saco Jetty, which is preventing sand from coming down the Saco River and replenishing Camp Ellis. And so now when sand moves northward, there's nothing there to fill it in. And of course, the irony is that was done to preserve the local economy and to make sure that our mills had access to ports. And now, of course, it's threatening our local economy, which, as you've pointed out, is so dependent on our beaches. And that's why I'm so grateful that our federal delegation is here and working with the states, and we're all working together to solve it, because it's not just climate change. This is a man-made structure and a man-made problem.
Thank you for that, and certainly don't want to leave folks with the idea that these are mutually exclusive to one another. I think it's really, I'm kind of a big picture thinker all the time, so when I look at that big picture, that's a piece of it, absolutely. But I think that things are being accelerated, certainly with climate change, in addition to what we've already done by people-made initiatives.
Yeah, I think it brings everyone together that if someone's more doubtful about climate change, this is a man-made problem. And a lot of, whether it's climate change or not, we're here to solve things. I mean, we need to get things done. I have a question for you, Lori, or state officials. Big part of the 10-year governor plan for economic development and then also the climate plan includes offshore wind. I know it's in a federal permitting process right now, and things will be addressed with the state very soon. Do you know where things stand with the Gulf of Maine Task Force and in Maine to really make a dent in electricity rates, especially in this age of rising fuel prices, that offshore wind and floating wind, we have we have world's top winds out there that are constantly going, and we have a project going on at Mohegan Island. Do you heard any word of converging on a meeting? Because one of the big things is that I personally, to get things moving forward, I think that lobstermen and fishermen need to be fully vested, if not owners, of these co-ops or companies to really fish the wind, in a sense. So.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I know there's been a number of policy initiatives that have been embarked upon and discussed in the Marine Resources Committee. And I know I mentioned my colleague, Representative Bloom. She's been a real leader in addressing these types of issues, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we need to assure that we have our lobster industry and our fishing industry engaged, because everything is so related. And there's all kinds of arguments on each side of those proposals with regard to offshore wind. I don't have the specifics on where we're at, but I can certainly get that back to the group and get it to David and you so that we can maybe have a more robust conversation about that moving forward.
I had a question for Peter regarding this. Do you see sea level rise? Is that something you monitor out there? And I totally agree with that it's the jetty is maybe 90% of the problem, but that doesn't mean it makes all the problems go away. And I think they need to be addressed mutually. And I was just curious as what you've seen out there.
Yeah. We have a lot of actually good sea level rise data in the state of Maine. The Portland Tide Gauge goes back to 1912, so we have really long-term records of what's been happening, and that's basically been following global oceans in terms of changes for the long term. Now, in the short term, so think of it about 2 millimeters per year, 1.8 millimeters per year, so what sounds like a pretty small amount, but over the last 25 years or so, we've basically seen a doubling of that rate. So if you think about it, the curve that's been pretty slowly going like this is now going like this. So, and that is about what's been happening on a global scale as well. So, what's interesting in the state of Maine is we're not. Some states are sinking as fast as sea level's rising. So you go to some of the Gulf states or some of the Southeast Atlantic states, and they're literally sinking as sea level's rising. So their rates are doubled because of that. We're not really sinking super fast at this point, so we're literally just responding to the rise in water level. So sea level is definitely having an impact on things. Back in 2010, sea level was a little bit higher than normal because of a variety of different factors, and we had a lot of erosion, some of the worst erosion of any year in 2010 of beaches, bluffs, and dunes. As a result. So another way to think about this is we've worked on some statistics in the state that look at low-lying areas that flood, and currently some of those areas, say they flood maybe 10 times a year or something like that. or 3 times a year. Over the last 10 to 15 years, they've been flooding at about 10 times per year, and with a foot of sea level rise, they'll be flooding 10 to 15 times more than that. So we have a good documented record about what's happened in the state in terms of sea level rise, and the Maine Climate Council has actually adopted the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee's recommendations for sea level changes, which is to look at 1.5 feet by the year 2050 and 4 feet by the year 2100. And those are over year 2000 levels, so using 2000 as the starting time. So if you think about a foot of water superimposed on what we see today, that's your baseline. And then you have the storms that we have today hitting that, and there's still a lot of science working out as to whether or not the storms will get worse, but we know the impacts of storms will get worse just because the water level is that much higher for the starting point.
I ask that we wait till after the presentations for questions. We want to get through these, so thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Mayor Doyle, would you want to speak? We're going to go quickly through some different levels of government and what they can do. Maybe tell us what we can do to get things moving. Or
Excuse me. So thank you, William Doyle, Mayor of Saco. I will be brief, and I know every politician says that, but I will really try to do so because I believe that sometimes being a leader is getting out of the way and collaborating and letting the folks that know the important information to get that information out to people. So with that, I'd like to thank our federal delegation, state delegation, our county delegation, our city council, our city staff, and most importantly, Save Our Shores, Saco Bay, and then most importantly, the Saco citizens, because without them, we are not able to be here making these all-important decisions. With that, implementation strategies. So the city of Saco has already started the process, which Representative Gremlich pointed out. This is not something that we can wait on. This is something that is a global thing that we all need to deal with. And so the city of Saco has started many years ago, and Director Fox can speak about that. We moved to fuel-efficient vehicles. Last year, the voters passed a bond to replace our infrastructure, our wastewater treatment plant, that will raise that up. So as we know sea level rise is coming, we will also raise up our wastewater treatment plant so that we are looking at newer technology for the future. And then also related to Saco Bay, we do have a legal counsel ready to go once we receive the project partnership agreement to review that, work with the state. Thank you, Representative Copeland, to work with the state on reviewing that project partnership agreement and then putting it before the city council. And again, in collaboration with that, I'm working with Save Our Shores, Saco Bay to try and get a dredge that will help us replenish that sand and work with other communities to do so. So these are all strategies. Hopefully they all come together. It doesn't always happen in government, but hopefully they will all come together and work together to resolve some of these issues that are plaguing our climate, our community, and the world. So thank you.
thank you, Mayor Doyle. Brian Ambrett is from the governor's office. He's been with us on a couple of initiatives, and anything you can tell us that would encourage us is appreciated.
Sure. Thanks, David. Brian Ambrett, I'm with the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation and the Future. I'm the Climate Resilience Coordinator. And in the somewhat unique position to not have to give the presentation that Representative Gremlich just gave. This is actually really exciting to be able to move out of the, making the case for why and actually be able to bring some solutions to the table today. So before I do that, I really want to applaud the city and SOS for the great work that's being done. And what you'll hear from me a couple times this morning is just the value of the planning and the community engagement work that you're doing so that you're ready for opportunities when they come along. So we have two exciting opportunities coming out of state government now that I'm really happy to share with you. One is an initiative that will be hosted at the Department of Transportation, but it's really bigger than transportation. This is going to be an infrastructure adaptation fund. It will have $20 million in it to start with. And it'll be a fund that's available to municipalities for updating, upgrading, and improving infrastructure that's either vulnerable because of climate change, or, and importantly, and this gets to the question that we were just discussing, making infrastructure more resilient to the impacts of climate change and incorporating those future sea level rise and other climate projections into the design of infrastructure. And so to the conversation we were just having about the relevance of climate change and sea level rise, if the structures that go in the water off of Camp Ellis aren't thinking about sea level rise and aren't designed with those projections in mind, their limited lifetime will be, or their lifetime will be limited to, when sea level rise rises. So we really want to be thinking about those future projections now as we're having these discussions so that those designs are taking the right measurements and the right projections into account. And so be thinking about that kind of activity. I'm not exactly sure that the Infrastructure Adaptation Fund will be, that this would be an eligible project under that fund, but these are the types of things that towns and communities around the state should be thinking about looking forward at their infrastructure and how to make infrastructure more resilient by taking in future projections. That fund will launch in April, and so keep an eye on DOT's announcements for that. The second program is one that I run out of the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future. It's called the Community Resilience Partnership. And it provides funding and technical assistance to municipalities and tribes in Maine to work on all of the things that the representative was describing in her presentation, whether it's electric vehicles and charging, other local emissions reductions, weatherization of public buildings, and then the whole range of resilience planning and implementation projects, whether it's shoreline or stormwater or thinking about public health and ticks. All of these things are projects that could be fundable under a grant from the Community Resilience Partnership. So we have $4.7 million in that partnership right now. And as I said, there's grants to communities to do the work, and then there are grants to service providers to offer communities technical assistance. And this is especially important for our smaller communities across the state that may not have the great staff that Saco does, to be able to do the pre-work and get ready for all of the funding opportunities that are coming, whether it's this program or federal opportunities that we know are in the pipeline through the various bills that have passed Congress and are working their way through. So I'll say it again. I'll say actually before I start that, Saco and some of the surrounding towns have enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership already and are actively going to be, I think, seeking grants in the coming round. Actually, tomorrow is the deadline for the first round of grants. And we'll be having grant deadlines twice a year on a 6-month basis. So look again at the late summer, early fall timeline for the next round of grants to be coming out. So I'll just come back to it and say it again, the value of municipal planning and the value of engaging stakeholders and building alliances like you've done is really, really crucial to being ready for when opportunities like these come along. So you guys have a really great leg up and keep up the good work, and I'm happy to be part of this process. Thank you again, David, for the invitation, and support you and help find some funding for the work that you all are doing.
Thank you, Brian. I was on the call you did with the partnership, and that definitely looks like a program that we could maybe take advantage of. I was thinking maybe dune planting might be a good thing for that one. So could you send me the links to those, and I will send them to everyone? Mary Beth Richardson is from DEP, and anything you can say about what we can and can't do, or what we should and shouldn't do?
Well, I love to go last, so this is good. I just want to, first of all, Mary Beth Richardson, I'm the director of Maine DEP's Southern Maine office in Portland. I just wanted to thank Representative Gramlich for the update that she gave, as well as sort of the capsule about the community and local homeowner opportunity for beach nourishment. That's going to be hopefully worked into what we call a permit by rule, which is something that we have for other activities under the Natural Resources Protection Act, and it's a 2-week turnaround. It's a very short form type of permitting process. So I'm hopeful that it will be of use once we get it formalized. So that's one thing that we're working on. We're also trying to improve some sort of policy processes with federal consistency reviews with the Army Corps of Engineers and their regular cycles of dredging, trying to accommodate their dredge priorities more quickly than we have in the past. So I know that's not what we're talking about here, but that's in an effort to facilitate some of these nourishment projects going forward to make it a simpler process for that. We're dealing with these issues of beneficial use right now and trying to sort of pave the way for some of these nourishment projects to happen easier. And we're also looking at, as Representative Gramlich mentioned, the licensing process and ensuring that applications that are submitted before the DEP take into consideration sea level rise and other climate issues. So those are the big picture items that DEP is very, very heavily engaged in. And I think I should mention here kind of what we might look at in terms of this particular process with the wave attenuating devices, which, as Peter said, are not, something that we've seen in Maine. Many years ago, the Drake's Island down in Wells, we're thinking about doing some sort of undercurrent stabilizers, but that never went anywhere. So this will be a sort of a guinea pig, I guess. And so we'll need to be looking at it. Obviously, it will require a Natural Resources Protection Act permit application, where we will have to consider the type of bottom habitat that might be affected by these devices. And we're very spatial in our application process, so we actually look at what areas going to be covered over and how it might affect the macroinvertebrate community that's there, or potentially eelgrass or other species that might be there. There might be some essential fish habitat there that need to be considered, diadromous fish, winter flounder, for example. So a lot of those things can be dealt with through timing restrictions. We would require, or based on certain recommendations from state agencies, that the work not be done during certain time periods of the year. We look to MGS for these types of projects to weigh in on geologic considerations, making sure that the project will have a beneficial impact on the sand budget. So that's obviously they're very heavily engaged in that right now. So this is great. We'll be looking to our marine resources folks to weigh in on some of those other issues. And always of concern is the bird issues and whether this potential project would have a beneficial effect on the beach as far as allowing more sand to accrete and allowing piping plovers, for example, to make use of these areas. So that would be a great benefit, obviously. So we're looking for those things as well. And also under NRPA, we have to consider visual impacts. So I imagine that these structures may be exposed during certain tide cycles, and we would want to know some information about what's visible above the surface. Will it be a visual impact? Keeping in mind that this process is a very public process, and the public is allowed to weigh in on their concerns. The other issues might be navigational issues, and so we need to consider those as well, and whether or not it requires some sort of a submerged land lease from the Parks and Lands folks. Those are all things that we have to consider. I know the other arm of the Army Corps will be very much interested in this process too, because they will require a permit as well. So there was a lot of information acquired during the last time that the Saco River was dredged. I don't know if any of that information could be made available for your application, but that's something to think about. You don't want to reinvent the wheel on some of this stuff, so happy to help out to try and coordinate some of that. And I guess that's all I have to say, if there's any questions.
Thank you. I want to mention that several of these people have been following some of this Living Shorelines work that we've been doing, and I thank all of you who've been supportive, and not sure what our next step is, but I think we're confident that if we get to a point where we can go further with it, that we have a good team to help us get where we want to go. Pat, do you want to say anything? Pat Fox is the Director of Public Works in Saco. He's more familiar with this than probably anybody.
I guess I never say no when asked if I want to say something. But I'm sort of preaching to the choir here with how unique our coastline is compared to others. You all know that we patch together roads down there. We try different innovative Band-Aids that we can come up with until we come up with a more permanent solution. And we'll continue to do so. I'm excited to hear about the DOT's Infrastructure Adaptation Fund and how that may be used. Just so you know, in addition to just the reactive stuff we do, we are always proactively looking for things that we can do to not have to rebuild Main Ave and North Ave intersection 15 times in my 15-year career. But one of them that we had, and we thought we had some funding mechanism for, was to use FEMA mitigation funds after our last disaster. So we put a lot of staff time and effort into trying to get a sheet pile wall that would replace the Jersey barriers that have been in place for decades, and shore up that corner so that we have that access to the Camp Ellis and the Camp Ellis Pier year-round, instead of essentially what's become a seasonal roadway that we just rebuild each summer. So unfortunately, as flexible as everyone in this room has been and the state has been to allow us special laws to give us a little bit of flexibility, Mary Beth and her office, as long as I send the right emails and keep them notified, they're very accommodating with what we have to do down there. Unfortunately, FEMA's funding frameworks, they're not built to recognize the unique Saco Bay coast. So the engineering assurances we have to provide for some of our solutions are very difficult right now, because the coast is so unique that you can't stamp a drawing to say your sheet pile wall will survive a 100-year storm in Camp Ellis, because we've found that there's not a lot that will handle a 100-year storm in Camp Ellis. So I think that's some of our challenges right now. So I'm hoping, maybe some programs at the state level will be a little bit more flexible than some of the federal programs to mitigate what we're dealing with.
Thank you. Supposedly there was an emergency declaration from a recent storm. Are we getting any money from that, and is there anything you can do with it?
I'm not aware. There was one storm this winter that we did put preliminary costs in. I'm not sure if that was a declared event. Oh, it was. Okay.
On that, Pat, also, that FEMA, for that declaration and any declaration that was called during 2021, the portion of funding from FEMA will be 90%, not 75%. Okay. Hopefully that would be helpful, because I know in talking with David that there was damage in Camp Ellis in that October storm. So just bear that in mind. If you need any assistance from us, or if you need that information, just let me know. I can send it over to you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat and Bonnie. We're running toward the end of our time period. Kathy, did you want to? I'll let you ask the question if you.
Well, not that everyone's here. I'll ask it differently. Laura, you had said that you're trying to come up with ways to let families or help people who have homes on the beach to do some sand replenishment and such. I know that the rules are that between April and the end of September, you can't plant dune grass. And I wonder if there's ever any chance, I'm a birder, I love plovers, but ways to look at, as Pat said, it's a unique situation, that will allow for some permitting that lets us plant dune grass when grass can grow in Maine.
Yeah, these conversations are being had right now. The timing restrictions that are in the rule right now are going to be reexamined. We've been meeting with hopefully this year. We've been meeting with folks from Inland Fisheries and Wildlife and talking about what is their actual concern, and when is that concern? Can we shorten that time period and we want to do it at a time where it's not going to disturb nesting birds, but we also want to make sure that the dune grass is being planted at the time that will maximize the potential for it to succeed. So, so we're looking at those dates now, and we recognize that the dates that are in there probably need to be updated.
That would be great. The other thing is that the permitting cost went from $25 to $250 per land, per owner, and that's prohibitive. 10 years ago, when Ferry Beach first put in that piece that we did, we had neighbors from the corner at Camp Ellis all the way through Kenny Shores, all in. Everybody planted grass, we had, everyone put in some money. It was very effective, as people pointed out about what has happened there. So if we could change what that costs, or maybe make it so it's a permit that the whole group that's working together could pay for?
I think it's worth exploring that. You know, certainly if there's a community group, like a homeowners organization, that would be considered one permit application. If you don't have an actual formal organization, I think we could explore a group, you know, sort of being co-applicants on a project. So, because we certainly don't want anything to prohibit people from doing this. We're trying to make it easier. So I understand about the fee. We had to do that a couple years ago. We were just running out of money. So, yeah.
But I just think that there's so much that we can do together, especially if we change the time frame. We put in grass when the dredge happened, and it helped capture that grass.
Yeah.
It was outside of the permitted time, and that's, there's still grass there now.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I think even if we don't, you know, mess around with the dates, we could just have a sort of an approval, like get IF&W to just approve, you know, this, you know, out of date, you know, planting for whatever reason. I think that there are definitely things we can do to facilitate that.
The birds can't go where there's no grass, so if we can put grass there,
And I'll just add, that was kind of the intent of my initial legislation, 775, LD 775, which really looked at, there were a couple of beach reports that occurred back in 2007, and then an update in 2017 with some really fantastic recommendations. Of course, these things all cost money. So we were happy to partner with the department in terms of trying to move in the direction of streamlining that processing, and I think there's always improvement that we can do. And you know, I know the Commissioner Loisum is, and her whole team do amazing work on at the DEP, and I think they're kind of modest when they make their appropriation requests. So we are always on the Environmental Committee really keen and eager to make sure that they've got the proper funding that they need so they can be successful, because their success is our success.
Quickly.
One quick question for Kevin. We talked about the two lanes, the city's lane with the Army Corps and the water Corps. It's an either or, right? It's not, you're not going to be doing both, of course.
Yeah, definitely separate lanes. Yeah, I mean, anything's a possibility at this point, but it's not money's not really going to be there for two things like that. But, you know, our position is that we believe that the WADs are better than a hard barrier, number one. Number two, there's nothing to be said that however this partnership agreement comes out as the non-federal sponsor, the city of Saco has abilities to affect cost. And if it's a less cost or a better engineering solution, I don't think there's nothing to be said that's part of it. And third, the PPA could relieve Army Corps of any liability in the future. So, I mean, that's City of Saco then to decide what's done ahead. That said, we just want it there. We just want it there when it's out there to look at. If the Army Corps deal fully collapses, we have this as an alternative. But right now, we just look at it as it's our application and funding that we got from the state, and it's a state report, and it's a tool in the tool shed right now.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I know we're running a little late, so I'm going to just say thank you to everybody, especially Peter and Lori, for presenting to us today, and everybody else who comes. I think we do this every year. Participation is great, and I'm totally grateful to all of you. And I think the one follow-up that I have, obviously we all, the seas are getting rougher, the waves are getting bigger, and we want to do things. And some of the programs like that Brian has made us aware of, and this, I think there's a fair amount of money. I always feel confident that Alex and Bonnie, if we need more money for the Army Corps, will somehow find a way to reach into somebody's pocket and get it, because I think it's going to be probably pretty obvious that what we have left in that 26.9 million is probably not going to be enough. But we leave it to you to find out a way to make it all happen. But anyway, I think there's things that we can look at. We need to look at. I think I'll follow up with some of the things that we talked about today, and hopefully, when we meet here next year, that we have something more to talk about. And thank you.
David, could I just say something about this?
Yeah, before you go, 1 second, Bonnie. Pete Hanrahan from Hanrahan Environmental. We're going to do a course at Ferry Beach next fall, and go ahead, you can.
Just real quickly, it's going to be, we're talking about at the Ferry Beach Retreat Resort, a full-day training event that would include both indoor and outdoor, but it would be all about technology, all about what's going on in the industry, and very specific, obviously, to what's going on at Camp Ellis. So it'll be held at Camp Ellis on Tuesday, September 27th. There are many people in this room who don't know it yet, but they're going to be approached as speakers, but they'll find out soon enough. It's basically a full-day education event that would again include both a classroom, but also some time out on the beach, too, and actually looking at real problems, real installations. So Tuesday, September 27th, I have a save-the-date event that I'll be in the back handing these out to those that want it. And I also have a reprint of an article that I wrote for a number of years ago for Erosion Control magazine that deals with coastal erosion control technology, and it does include wave attenuation devices. So I'll be right back there. If anybody wants this information, they can have it. Thanks very much for the time.
Thank you, Pete.
And I just want to thank Pete Hanrahan from Hanrahan Environmental Solutions. He is the one representing living shorelines type solutions, and he is the one who brought us Living Shoreline Solutions, the company for the WAD devices. So he's a native Mainer and, is in Maine here, here for us as our advisor, and I can't thank Peter enough. So thank you.
I also should say that there's a lot of interesting webinars that I run across. Actually, you're doing one tomorrow, which I'm going to attend, and Emily Green from Saco Watershed also hosts a lot of interesting topics that people can get educated pretty quickly on a lot of this, and I think a lot of technology is changing, and how we're ultimately going to battle this is yet to probably be determined. But thank you all for doing that, and thank you for coming.